I rise today, Mr. Speaker, to call for the impeachment of the President of the United States of America.
I was president of the Houston NAACP for nearly a decade, and I've had many experiences with people who perpetuate hate. But I, quite frankly, did not expect it to come in to my office the way it did.
You ain't gonna impeach nobody, you fucking nigger. Try it, and we'll lynch all you fucking niggers. You'll be hanging from a tree.
When people indicate that they would murder you, you have to take it seriously. We, of course, contacted the Capitol Police. They will investigate, and hopefully the perpetrators will be caught, and they will be punished, they will be prosecuted. This is something that has really had an impact because we have young people working in our office. We have one young lady who is still in high school, and we want to protect the staff. We also have to protect people at our town meetings. We had an impeachment town meeting. We had to have many security officers there. We had about 10. We had to have the room swept before we actually started the meeting. We had to take extraordinary measures to make sure that the public was protected. So these things do have an impact, but the one impact that they will not have is that of causing us to be intimidated and to decide that we will not go forward. We will go forward as we've indicated, and I assure everyone that at some point there will be an impeachment resolution on the floor of the House of Representatives.
Hey, Al Green, we got an impeachment for you. It's going to be yours. In fact, we even give you a short trial before we hang your nigger ass.
I didn't see anybody calling for the impeachment of your nigger Obama when he was born in Kenya. He's not even an American. So fuck you, nigger.
I want people to know that we receive many more calls in support of what we're doing than in opposition, and many more calls being very kind and supportive than hateful and mean-spirited.
Mr. Speaker, we are talking about a president who fired the FBI director who was investigating the president for his connections to Russian involvement in the president's election.
Is your conclusion, it sounds like you've made a conclusion that the president engaged in obstruction of justice, is it based on classified intelligence that we have not seen, or is it based on news reporting that we've all seen?
Well, it's based upon a confession that the president made on national TV at prime time.
When I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse.
Now, what he said was the Russia thing was made up. He didn't think that it was something that would merit the kind of investigation that was taking place. Well, you can't fire the person who's investigating because you disapprove of the investigation, because you think that the investigation might have a certain outcome. That's the purpose for having the investigation, to determine what actually happened.
Do you believe there's also an underlying crime, or is obstruction of justice the extent of your concerns?
Well, it's important to note that regardless as to whether collusion is proven, regardless as to whether there is some infraction related to the emoluments clause, the obstruction of justice still stands. Once he committed the obstruction of justice, if all the other things go away, that is still an impeachable offense, and it will follow the president as long as he is in office.
How can you weigh in? Well, you can contact my good friends over at Free Speech for People. And at this organization, they have a petition.
Free Speech for People began their campaign to impeach the president based on the emoluments clause of the Constitution. Did you take a stand on that before you saw President Trump speak to Lester Holt on NBC News?
Well, I have opinions about that, but that's not something that's a part of the obstruction of justice that I'm calling to the attention of the public. So I have tried as best as I can to stay focused on what has actually occurred that I am confident is obstruction of justice, but I support that movement.
I think it's pretty clear that President Trump has a special symbolic meaning to a lot of Americans. Do you understand why having an African American be the first to mention impeachment on the House floor might have been especially hard for people who supported Donald Trump to hear?
I'm not privy to whether the person was a Trump supporter or not. But I will say this, the president, with some of his commentary in the election and some of his behavior, did give people reason, it seems, to say things and do things that they might not have said and done. Some of the comments that he made about people who were protesting at his rallies and some of the behavior that was manifested after his commentary. I also recall that the president did not immediately denounce David Duke and the actions of the KKK in announcing their support for him. Whether he did it with intentionality or not, they were signals that were received.
The origins of our country's history of domestic terrorism was in response to progress. They were reacting to African Americans being elected to state houses and to Congress, and the terrorism was designed to push back against that, and that's why I find it especially chilling that this is directed at you in response to your exercising your duties as a member of Congress.
Well, I do not disagree with your premise, but I would add this. The mere fact that people were brought here in slave ships was an act of terrorism, but it is not now what it was then. We know that ugly things are happening, but I don't want to overemphasize them to the extent that it appears I'm de-emphasizing the progress that's been made.
Eventually, I think you recognize that you're going to need Republicans to feel that it's in the nation's interest, or perhaps in their own electoral interest, depending on the level of cynicism that you have, that they would want to do something that would really upset their base.
When you do the right thing, history will acquit you, and I will be vindicated. Those who will take up this cause are going to be vindicated by history. So I'm not too concerned about whether the Republicans are going to do one thing or the Democrats another. I'm more concerned about making sure that no person is above the law. The president has committed an impeachable offense, and he should not be above the law.